Welcome to this episode of What's Happening in Waupaca. I am Joni. Today on the show, we're talking about internet. And even though that doesn't sound really exciting, I am excited about it because I think we're going to learn a lot about internet in rural places like Waupaca, because we know all kinds of things about how the internet should work and does work in big cities, but it is different when we get out into the country. So we have Josh Werner here, who is the IT director for the city of Waupaca. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
And we have Cliff Radke here, who is also, you are with Waupaca Online, so you work with the internet as well as doing some other things around here, right?
Yes, yes,
Cool.
thanks, Joey.
So we are going to start the show, and we're going to talk about something that I don't necessarily understand, which is how does the internet work in Waupaca? How is it laid out?
Well, being a rural area, it's varied and it's challenging in places. And let me start out by asking you a question. You live out in the country,
I do.
and you've said before that you have decent DSL out there.
Yes. Yep.
What if you moved to a house out in the rural area and got there and found out that you really couldn't get any decent internet, that your options were really limited? How would that hinder you?
Well, it did. When we moved out to our house, we had to get satellite because we didn't have any other options. And I didn't like it. I mean, we're talking about 15 years ago, so it's come a little bit in technology, but it was slow and it was choppy and it would forever cut out. So today, when I can work from home, that would have been a huge problem.
And do you know there are still places in this county where that exact situation described is the only way to get internet?
Well, I know that you and I have talked about it, and we've talked about how rural Waupaca County is hard to get decent internet, or there isn't anything at all, right?
So that's the frustration of a lot of people, not just unique to Waupaca County, but in rural America, whether it's in Wisconsin or other states, there's that frustration out there. And we want to talk a little about what's going on here at home for internet. And I know Clifford's got a lot of information about that, but when you take a look at Waupaca County, we've got our cities and villages. And most of those cities and villages overall are covered pretty decent by either pretty good DSL or cable internets. That's cable coming into your home over Spectrum, Charter type stuff. But then you break down those individual cities, those villages. Here in Waupaca, there are 4 distinct neighborhoods in the city that have actually pretty poor internet coverage.
Here in the city
Within the
of
city limits.
Waupaca?
And I'll give you one example. If you go up by Swan Park, you go up to that street right north of it. I forget the road's called, but it's the Swan Ridge neighborhood. And that's a newer neighborhood, I don't know, within the past 10 years or so. There's no cable TV service or cable internet. The only cabled provider in that neighborhood is DSL, and from what I've heard from residents, the most they can get is 3 megabits per second speed.
No, I don't. Explain why. I mean, I guess I understand why DSL, I'm spoiled to have DSL. I think we're the last people on the road or something to get that cable. I mean, truly. But I know that there are a lot of places, even in Waupaca, I know somebody that has a hard time getting internet in there. But what I think I don't understand is why. I mean, why isn't internet something that's just automatically available to everyone, especially today when we are working and we're doing our homework and we're streaming TV and we're entertaining ourselves? I mean, so what's the problem with that?
Well, the biggest problem is the cost. I'm not in a situation where I've ever gone out and said, hey, I need to run fiber for 3 miles. How much is it going to cost? But I'm consistently hearing that the price to run cable, whether it's fiber, whether it's coax, whatever technology you're using, anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 per mile. And it varies. Are you running under streets? Is it underground run? Is it pole to pole? And you go into rural America, you've got a road that's a mile long, and you've got 3 houses on it, and you're spending, let's say, $30,000 to run that. How many years is it going to take to make that investment back before you're actually making money and making profit on what you set up?
So is here where I get to be sarcastic and say they could take some of the profits out of the houses that they're running at 20,000 a mile and have 1,500 places?
Well,
right? So yes.
I think it's not even. I'm sure they could recoup their costs eventually, but it's more a matter of I think anyway, it's more a matter of they have to justify the profit. They can make more of a profit in the urban centers still. So they'd have to justify that to their shareholders,
Sure,
a lot of these big
absolutely.
companies.
Yeah.
So that's why they don't do it. And in fact, I don't even see them doing it anytime soon either, which is one of the reasons why we're doing some of the things that we do here in Waupaca County.
I'll jump to another kind of subtopic on this from the government perspective. So when you use public right-of-way, there are a lot of utilities that can use that for free, but there's also franchise fees. And back when cable television became prevalent, municipalities are allowed to charge a franchise fee for using the public right-of-way to run that cable, because that cable TV per se isn't an essential service. It's not electric, it's not a telephone line.
Sure.
And in Wisconsin, it used to be local control. So each local municipality that had cable running it through it could work out their own franchise agreement with that cable operator. And here in Waupaca, it's currently Spectrum. So there used to be some negotiation room and some sway on that where, okay, we've got this neighborhood north of Swan Park that doesn't have really good internet. And possible negotiation could have been the city saying, well, hey, we'll keep your rates, your franchise rates as is if you promise in the next year to build out that neighborhood. Wisconsin shifted, thanks to AT&T pushing them, that now the state negotiates that franchise agreement for the whole state. So there's no more local control. So as long as the state's happy, it doesn't matter. So now the local municipalities have lost maybe that last footing to be able to better their communities by enticing those companies to build in an area or two.
And I understand that point of view. I understand, Cliff, about the business. You really do have to justify the cost. But then if I were living out somewhere where I either didn't have internet or I couldn't work with it, and I had kids that were coming home from school with homework that they needed to do on their computers on the internet, which is now expected, I would have a huge issue with that.
And a lot of people struggle with that right now.
Well, yeah, because you're expecting that internet is something that I just automatically have at my house, and you're expecting me to be able to teach my children, but then the service isn't provided for me either.
Yeah, you'd think it would be ubiquitous. It would just be everywhere, but it's not. Do you guys think it might actually affect like property values as well? Because I've heard people ask that as well.
I could see that would probably happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that I would think, I didn't think about it when I bought a house out in the country. It didn't occur to me that I'd be in the country and not have internet. And so we got it, but I can see today where we are so dependent or working from home where I would have to make sure that I had good internet.
If I were shopping for the house, one of the top things on the list would be looking at internet. And I know a handful of people, some of them very technology-oriented people, that have built new houses that didn't ask that question first. They get their house all done, they get ready to move in and realize, I really can't get decent internet here.
Yeah.
People don't think of that.
Yeah, well, they're starting to now, I think. I mean, that's a question that's being asked more and more. So, I mean, if there's a lot of reasons why we'd want to, why we do the things that we do here, but yeah.
Okay.
So when we look at the rural areas in this county, one of the things, I won't say it's unique to Waupaca County, but when you compare neighboring counties, with the traditional telephone companies, they're regulated by the state of Wisconsin Public Service Commission. There's different rules. If they change their rates, they have to get that approved. They have specific territories they operate in. They can't cross those lines without getting PSC approval, and usually whoever's on the other side of that line would protest that and say, no, we don't want them in our areas. So there's a lot of maybe outdated business model with how that works. And when you think about, okay, telephone lines were ran how many years ago? Those are almost everywhere, those copper telephone lines that come into your house. That infrastructure exists, and they've found ways over the years to use that to push data, your dial-up T1, your DSL internet. And the way DSL works is the farther out you get, the weaker the DSL signal gets, the slower and least responsive it gets until it's to a point where it's not usable. So in Waupaca County, we've got, let me count here, we've got 1, 2, 3, we've got, from my count, 7 different telephone companies operating in this county. And they've all got their distinct territories that they operate in. And most of them, their main office locally, or their central office, is located within whatever community they're nearby. So we've got CenturyLink that kind of services the rural Waupaca areas. They're based out of the city of Waupaca. You've got Solaris, they're based out of the city of Manawa. You've got another example would be TDS, and they're Iola, Scandinavia. So they've all got their service area, and the farther out you get from those communities, the worse the service gets because of distance issues. And because their territory is finishing, there's no incentive for them to do some stuff further out because they're going over to the next community. It's not like TDS, who's in Ireland, Scandinavia, is also servicing Manawa, where it makes sense for them to run some lines between the communities. That's not happening. So that's one thing that's kind of unique here. We've got all these different telephone companies. And if you look at Waupaca County to the south, I think there's fewer in there. I know CenturyLink's very prevalent down there. I think the
What I have.
west side of the county, I think that might be Solaris. I think there's maybe just 2 or 3 telephone providers in Waupaca County. So I hear a lot of complaints down there, but CenturyLink's covering a greater area down there, not just around one community, so it opens up some enhancements too. Not everywhere, but in certain areas. So we've got
Okay.
such a fragmentation of all these different providers in this county, and I think that hurts things a little bit.
I think so. I mean, it's great for prices, because in the days when the AT&T owned the phone lines, I mean, you're not old enough, but you know, I can remember $300 and $400 a month phone bills because long distance was 75 cents a minute or $1 or $1.25 a minute. So if I wanted to call my mom, right?
You better be quick.
Well, and I wasn't, you know, and
Yeah.
I'm not very talkative, but you know, once in a while. So anyway, that's a little facetious.
You're right.
Anyway, so I mean, dividing it up, everything is a shade of gray. So dividing it up means that there's better competition, so that the prices are lower for those of us that need the service. But when you're talking about an area like this, where no one is allowed to cross any lines because nobody is cooperating with each other.
Well, the phone companies can't cross lines. There are other companies out there doing stuff in this county that can cross the lines because either they're not regulated or they don't fall into the whole telephone.
So is that where the satellite sits?
Well,
Is-
satellite's a different thing. Satellite is mostly everywhere. The cell phone stuff's a whole separate case of worms. But let's take our populated areas, generally the cities and villages. Some of the very populated rural areas like the Chain of Lakes and King, you've got the phone company who's got that territory there, but the cable company doesn't fall into those same guidelines. So now you might have, you know, in the say Waupaca, a lot of places you have a choice of AT&T DSL or Spectrum cable internet. But once you get more rural, it's just the phone lines out there. You know, Spectrum isn't going to spend the money to run coax cables up and down every street because it's not profitable.
All right.
So now once you get
Okay.
up to the rural areas, that's where you've got just that one provider there. Cabled provider, I should say.
Okay, okay. Well, did y'all follow that? I mean, that was a pretty in-depth, but I'll bet it still only barely touched the surface of internet. It's when we aren't touching something, I mean, we notice it when it's gone, but we're not touching it. We don't have to move it around. It becomes one of those things, like, why don't I just automatically have it?
Let me give you an
So-
example. My parents, they live in rural Columbia County. They're about 2.5 miles from the nearest village. And when we first got internet, it was dial-up. And then when DSL became available, we got DSL. And as of about a year and a half, 2 years ago, when they canceled DSL, the fastest they could get was a 0.5 megabit per second down, 512 kilobits per second. That was it. Which, when you look at companies like Spectrum that are offering 100 megabits per second, or if you're in a really good DSL coverage area, maybe you're getting 20 megabits per second, they got 0.5 megabit per second. And just to stream, I've got the stat here, just to stream a basic standard def video reliably, you need 1.5 megabits per second. So they had a third of that.
Wow.
And that's the most they could get. And they ended up canceling and going with satellite. My dad thinks it's better. I disagree. I think it's actually worse. That's a whole nother topic.
I'll tell you what, we're gonna break there for just a couple of minutes. We're talking about internet today. Where are we at? What is out there? How can we understand it? What are the pros and cons? And we are going to end the show with what is in our future, which I think is just as interesting. So Josh, Cliff, we will be right back here. This is What's Happening in Waupaca, and I'm Joni.
Here's to the things that can keep us safe. Those we use all the time with hardly a thought. Those that are silently standing by to save our lives. And now, those that we carry with us everywhere we go. Many mobile devices will now bring you wireless emergency alerts, real-time information directly from local sources you know and trust. With the unique sound and vibration, you'll be in the know wherever you are.
Today we are talking internet. We're talking with Josh Warner. We're talking with Cliff Radke. We have both of you here. I'm glad you could join us. It's actually a pretty lively discussion because we're learning some things I think we need to know, but we tend to just brush off as we're going to have internet no matter what, right? Because everybody has internet, so why do I need to worry about it?
Yeah.
Which isn't at all true, is it?
A lot of people struggle with that.
They do. They do struggle with that. So talk to me a little bit about what types of internet there is in this area.
Well, I think the first thing to look at is what measures a successful internet connection. So there's a lot of different internet you can pick from out there, but how good is it? And I think there's kind of four main things. There's your download speed, and that's what everyone advertises. You can get 100 megabits per second, you can get 20 megabits per second. And that's how fast the data comes in. So as you stream a video, download an email, that's the data coming to you.
And I understand that, but now you have to define megabit for me.
Okay. Well, there's megabytes and there's megabits. A megabyte is 8 megabits. So like marketing terms, you'll usually hear them say it's 100 megabits per second or
The
something
higher
like
the
that.
number, the better.
Or that, yeah.
And that's the only thing I get about that is, you know, I watch the advertisements, you know,
Sure.
5 gig, 4 gig, 100 megabytes. I'm like, sure.
So you've got the speed, so you've got the download, then you've got the upload, how much you can send out. So when you send that email, when you upload that video, so that's another measure. And then you bring up, 5 gigs, 2 gigs. Not all internet services, but some of them have limitations on how much data you can use within a month.
Data caps.
So that's the 1 gig, the 5 gig, and that's the satellites and the cellular. And then the other thing is latency, basically how responsive is the connection.
Meaning what?
Meaning
Latency.
if you're using satellite internet, the reason that's so choppy and feels slow is because you're sending your data tens of thousands of miles into the sky to a satellite dish versus going on a cable line or a fiber line that's run to your
Right.
house.
Or,
Okay, but
yeah.
here's where I get to be sarcastic because at the office, I share my office with another gal. She sits about 10 feet away. You have any idea how long it takes to get an email from my computer to her computer?
Because it's going outside your building.
I
Yeah.
don't have any
Yeah.
idea. I don't have any idea. We just watch and go, nope, don't have it. Nope, don't have it. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
We say when we need to transfer information
And it
back and
depends
forth.
where your
So-
email server is, who the provider is. It could be traveling thousands of miles between
Okay.
your desk to get back to her.
But I don't
Right, yeah.
care about a megabyte or
Well, you
megabit.
asked. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't care if I know if I get 1 megabyte per second or if I get 1,000,000 gigabytes per second, because I don't understand that measure. Does that make sense? I don't understand it.
Okay.
So
So
what I
each
want to know.
piece of data you get's a certain size, whether it's a file you're downloading, an email you're receiving, a video you're watching, is a certain piece of data. That picture you're downloading might be that small, but the video you're streaming might be this big. So
There's some standard rates too.
so,
Like you were mentioning the standard video, for example. You're going to want to have so many megabits per second. If you're going to do HD video, you might want 5 to 8. If you want 4K, you might want 25 or
yeah.
something like that.
So, okay, let's make this simple.
Yeah.
Think of a highway. You've got a highway. You've got a 2-lane highway, 1 lane in each direction. You've got your upload lane and your download lane.
Yep.
And you've got a little tiny car, a little
Yep.
Volkswagen Beetle, and you've got that filled with data. And that's going 55 miles an hour, and you've got another one behind it.
Okay,
Okay,
where's the Corvette?
you've only got 1 lane where you're trying to shove that data through. And maybe that little Volkswagen Beetle's filled with, that's a picture. That's a picture you're trying to download. Okay, let's say you want to stream a video. That's a semi-truck. Now you're sharing that 1 lane with 2 of them. You're trying to watch that video and you're trying to download that picture at the same time. And you've only got 1 lane for them to work in. That's going to
Okay.
take a while. But now let's say you take Interstate 41 that's got 3 lanes going in that direction. Well, now you can do that video at the same time as that picture because there's more lanes. That's how much download speed you have, how many lanes. Think of it as lanes on a road. And then think of your different data. You've got the little pictures, that little tiny car. Your video you're streaming is that big semi-truck. Maybe something in between. Maybe you got a standard size car, pickup truck or something. That's your standard size thing. And how many of them you can line up on that connection and how much space you have. So the more lanes, the more download, the better. Is that?
It explains it, but here's the simpleton point of view, because I know where the on-off button is on my computer.
There it is.
And barely anything else. Here's if I was shopping for internet, and I'm spoiled because I have DSL and I like it very much.
And I've
But
been
if-
to your place, and it's actually not it's good for you where you are, but it's not the fastest internet out there by any means. But you're lucky to have what you have where you are.
That's good to know. And I mean, it works for me, and I think it's just about as fast as it is when I'm at the office. I don't have any idea. But that's the way people who are not in the IT world, I want it to be able to send and receive. I don't want to, the old dial-up, you could sit there and take a nap while you were waiting for this thing to, I want it to go fast.
So you've mentioned
And
your
then
internet does everything you need it to do, correct? You're content with it.
Yes.
You're able to work from home. You're able to
Yep.
do everything you want to do online.
Yep.
So in your case, maybe these measures aren't important. You're satisfied with what you have. If you're satisfied with what you have, why change it?
Right.
I look at these measures,
Yeah.
and if somebody said, well, I have three different programs that you can choose from. You can choose from 5 megabytes a second to 10 megabytes and 15. I would say, I just want it to work fast.
I have an idea how to make this relevant, actually. Pretend like you got 3 kids at home, and they all play games. Suddenly, all these things start to matter now. So like the latency that you were mentioning, let's say you have satellite internet. Nobody's going to be able to play Xbox. Nobody's going to be able to play games because it's going to take like a second for anything they do on their game to get to the server and get back, because it's not just going there and back, it's going
Tens of thousands
of miles out into space, then back down. They won't be able to play, and then you'll hear about it because they're going to talk to you about the Wi-Fi not being good enough.
Or you say your internet's good enough right now, you've got those 3 kids at home and they want to stream videos, and all of a sudden what you're trying to do doesn't work anymore because you don't have enough lanes.
And then
And that's the same way with DSL as it is with anything else.
It's the same
is
measure
I've
with
only
an
got-
internet. It's how many megabits per second
Right.
download you have.
Okay.
Yeah, see, and that's where these things start to, is when I think you throw kids into the mix and suddenly now everything
You've
becomes
got your
complicated.
Volkswagen Beetle, your images you're downloading from your email, but your 3 kids each have a semi-truck coming in with that video, and you've only got 2 lanes to share. How's that going to work out?
Yeah.
Versus faster internet with more lanes.
I've had several people in the house where I've been on the internet and they have all been on Wi-Fi and their cell phones and nothing slowed down. Why is that?
It just depends what they're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If they're watching
So-
Netflix
Okay.
on their phone,
If
and
you've,
other
got,
kids,
if you've got those big semi-trucks taking up all that space trying to download Netflix or some other streaming service,
Okay.
now you're going to get just, if it's just everyone looking on Facebook or doing small stuff, you might not notice.
yeah.
Okay, so talk to me about the difference, because
Okay.
you have, on my notes, we have different. We have the phone line, which is dial-up almost everybody. It's kind of like a rotary dial
Yeah.
phone anymore, right? Isn't it?
So,
Well-
so phone, that was the original phone lines, the original way data communicated.
Twisted pair, that's what they called them.
And those lines have been out there forever. So yeah, you start with dial-up, then T1, which is more of a business application. It's pretty expensive. It's a dedicated link. And then you've got DSL, and that's what a lot of people who are getting service over the phone lines use today. And that's all distance-based. The closer you are to the central office or their equipment, the faster it can be. The farther out you get, the more that signal degrades, the slower it is, the least responsive it is. And that's the problem in the rural areas.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense to spend all that money to put something out there for a couple dozen houses when that's not profitable for a company like that.
This is true. Okay, next one.
Yeah, well, do you still want to talk about the phone technologies, like, or going
Well,
back
then you've got
to T-Mobile, or-
cable.
Well, yeah, let's talk about cable.
Yeah, well, of course, there's the coax cable. So a lot of that data is going through the coax cable. That's why they call it cable. It's a much thicker one. It has really good insulation against what they call EMI, that's electromagnetic interference. So it's able to carry a stronger signal. So, but there's only a few different providers that are going to bring that out there. So I think there was some listed here. Oh, that's right. Mine doesn't have two
And with
sides.
today's technology, with the fiber that's out there, if you were a provider and want to run new lines somewhere, does it make sense to put cable, which is outdated technology, or does it make sense to run fiber, which is future-proofing yourself?
Right. I mean, well, it is that. There is that aspect of it too. But yeah, I mean, the cable itself is going to be usually better quality than twisted pair. They call it twisted pair. That's just the phone cable that you have in there, in your phone. So it's just too little. You'll notice it's twisted, and the reason they did that is because I think it was Bell. Was that the guy who discovered that if you twist them, it prevents them from interrupting each other, the electricity you're sending across it, so they twist them. Anyway, so that only goes so far, though. You can do phone conversations over that, and then you got DSL, and you probably have DSL filters at your place, right?
Yes.
Yep, they put them on the phones and everything. I remember that's a.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if that's something we still use or not. I
Yes.
think the answer is,
If you've got phone service on the same
Yep.
line, yes.
Yep.
guess who fixes my computer? It's Josh.
Yeah.
I just say help, and he helps.
Yeah, and those are low pass filters, and it's because they're actually working very much the same as the old dial-up modems. They're just doing it at a much higher frequency. So like
Okay.
with the old dial-up modems, you could actually hear that. You could hear them do the noises and
Yes.
you know, that whole thing. Well, DSL is kind of the same thing, just way higher frequency. So yeah, but then there's cable. And cable is really good. And if you cut one of those cables apart, you'll see all the sheathing in there and everything. It's
Yep.
really
And
good.
because of that insulation, that doesn't allow the signal to degrade as quick as
Right.
over phone lines that don't have insulation.
Right.
Or
Which
have
are-
minimal insulation.
Well, yeah, in fact, they're flimsy. I mean, if you just look at them, they're very thin, you know, whereas a coax cable is thicker, it doesn't bend so easy, stuff like that. Fiber is where it's at, though, right now.
Speed of light. You're moving
Yeah.
data at the speed of light. That's glass. Tons of capacity in that. And that's the future of wired communication.
But fiber still needs to be run, right?
Yeah.
It still needs, you still need a line dug into the ditch. So if you're talking about $20,000 or $25,000 a mile,
Yeah.
That's cheap. That's a
Yeah.
cheap number.
that's a cheap number
Yeah.
to
Could be
run any kind
easily
of,
50,000 too.
Yeah.
for any kind of cable, then why on earth would they use that? Because the next one on this note, and I think this ties in, is why on earth would I approve of a company spending $25,000, $50,000 to run fiber out to my house when I know that wireless is next, or wireless is already here and I should be able to be using it?
Well, there's multiple things that are next, and fiber is a big part of what's current and what's going to be next.
Okay.
But your point, the cost to run it to rural America is outrageous.
Yeah, and some people might say, well, you don't have to run it all the way to the person's property. Then you can just run it to that general area and then split it up. But that's not even enough sometimes. What if the phone lines out there are just, they've been rained on and they're corroding and they're broken and just all this. Some of those might be, who knows how old they are, and they're in terrible shape. So even if you run fiber out there, it's going to perform terribly anyway. So you're going to have to, you know, do all this extra work basically to make that work. It's a great technology. It's just very expensive.
I spend a lot of time out biking in rural Waupaca County, and I don't know how many of the, those little green phone boxes at
junction
the side of the
boxes.
road, how many of them are broken and sitting wide open or have a bag taped over them. They're not
There's an
maintaining
animal living in
that
it,
very
yeah.
well. So if you're getting service through that and it's not being maintained well, your service probably isn't as good as it could
Yep.
be.
All that
I
stuff will
think my
affect
green
it.
box is in pretty good shape.
You're lucky.
Is
The,
it? Yeah.
the last time I mowed past it, I think it was in good shape.
So then you brought up wireless. There's a couple different wireless opportunities for internet.
Right, because we start with fixed wireless, right?
And that's kind of a point-to-point wireless. That's not, so there's kind of three different wireless technologies. There's fixed wireless, there's satellite, and then there's cellular. Kind of the three ways you can get internet to your house without cables coming onto your property.
Okay.
So we already beat the horse on the head with satellite. You're sending your data tens of thousands of miles into the sky.
Yeah.
I don't know of any satellite provider that really gives you true unlimited data. They all cut you off or throttle you down at some point. The cell phone companies, whether you're using on your smartphone or you've got some sort of MiFi device at your house, it's dependent how close you are to the cell tower, what kind of signal you're getting, how fast it is.
And then there's the fine print. A lot of times
Yeah.
when you set it up as a hotspot, or do the tethering thing, which you
Not all
I'm su-
providers allow for that.
Yeah,
They'll
and
cut
even-
you off sooner.
Yep, and even if you don't, they'll have the little fine print, and they'll say, well, after 2 gigs, we're going to bring you down to 2G speeds or something, which incidentally is dial-up speed, so totally unusable for anything that most people are using today.
And there's
so.
two reasons the cell companies do that. One, it's all about profits.
Yeah.
We can charge you more if you go over on your data, so you got the profit side
Right.
of things, and then you got this other side of things. How many people are sharing that same cell tower? You got to give a fair piece to everyone, and if you've got a handful of users that are just consuming data, and hogging it, what's left for the other people? So we talk about that highway coming in. There's only so much going to that tower to split between anywhere from a couple dozen to a couple hundred subscribers on there.
And I wouldn't even think of, I can wrap my head around the highway for DSL with that, but it wouldn't have ever occurred to me that that would be an issue with wireless. But it is?
Oh, yeah.
So Waupaca Online, let's talk about Waupaca
So
Online.
that's fixed wireless.
So
Yep.
that's a fixed wireless, so that's a point-to-point. Cliff, why don't you explain to me what exactly, how does that work?
Well, we have pops, is what we call them, and we set them up around the areas. And then we put well, I'll skip the acronyms. I'll just go right to the equipment. We stick something on your house.
I
Basically.
understand that.
Okay, and we pointed at our stuff that's sitting on a silo, and we route it back, and we pay for connection, and we do routing, and we just take whatever you're sending out from your house, bounce it on back and forth. We create a connection that way, essentially through all that series of equipment. So that's, in the simplest terms, how Waupaca Online works.
So why, if I'm sending my data through the air, why am I on a highway?
Because when you look at anything that comes wireless, whether it's listening to a radio station like Waupaca Radio, a little promotion.
There you go.
Whether you're listening to a radio
Beautiful.
station,
Good
or whether
station.
you're using your cell phone, or whether you're doing fixed wireless internet, or whether you're watching a TV station, there's only so much space in the wireless spectrum that you can use for communication before you get into visible light and X-rays and all that stuff that you can't use to communicate per se. And all that space is divvied up and allocated to different things. So radio gets so much space, and television gets so much space. And there's only so much space there for each of those different services to use, and then you take fixed wireless and the little area they can operate in, that gets divvied up even further.
So we're talking about a rainbow where everybody has one color?
A rainbow.
Somewhat,
I think
but
so.
Kind of, does that
And
explain
within,
it?
and within that one color, so okay, Waupaca Online's got blue to work with.
Yeah.
That's their color, that's their space on the spectrum.
Okay.
Well, they're doing so much different stuff, we can't allocate all that blue just to one user. We've got to split that between everything that's going on,
So you're literally filling up that airspace.
Yeah.
to some extent.
Yeah, the rainbow analogy is actually really good because those are like channels. No, I laugh
You
because
were
that's perfect.
laughing.
That's because it's perfect. In wireless technology, there are channels, and there's only so many channels, and this and that. It is very much
And
like
the
a
channels
rainbow.
are only so big.
And that's
Yeah.
the channels, because it's 96.3.
And you've got multiple
right?
people sharing those channels.
Yeah, so it's just like what you said. Actually, you hit it right in the head.
Okay.
So,
All right.
There's, you've got your lanes in the sky too.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
You think wireless, you can't have two airplanes flying in the same space just because they're up in the air not following the roads, which are the wires. They'd crash, and your data would do the same thing.
But they're solid matter. And wireless is
Think of water.
not solid matter.
Think of water, and you'd stick your finger in the water, and there's ripples that go out. You know what I mean? That's kind of like how wireless works. It's creating waves in the air. And if they intersect, they start to interrupt each other, and it starts getting garbled, and then you can't, it's literally just like that.
So they're sound waves.
Yeah,
It's an analogy, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It's a wave, and yeah, they kind of operate
If
similarly.
I'm sitting here talking to you, you can hear me, we can communicate. He starts talking over me, now you can't hear what I'm saying. And now your signal's being degraded because we're trying to share the same
Yeah,
space.
Airspace.
yes.
My head hurts, folks. This is really a cool conversation. I'm enjoying this a lot. We're going to take a short little break. We are going to come back and talk about the future of, we're going to talk about wireless, and we're going to talk about fiber optic cable and all of the magical things that haven't been invented yet. We'll see you in a little bit. I'm Joni.
Make a difference. Pass it on. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Welcome back to this episode of What's Happening Waupaca. I am Joni. We've been talking internet with Josh Warner and with Cliff Radke. We're talking about what Waupaca specifically has to offer, kind of where we've come from and the types of internet that are out there. And on the break, I was kind of laughing at Cliff because he's considerably younger than I am, honestly. And he was laughing about dial-up, and I was telling him that when I was in high school, we had a computer lab that nobody used because computers were never going to be part of our world. I mean, that's how much this has changed. So if we take that, I mean, we started out on a DSL, or no, on dial-up. And in fact, the first computers I used on jobs, there was no such thing as the internet. So how can we go from dial-up working, I mean, it was a pain if I wanted something fast, but it worked, it's what I had, to now you're talking about needing 100 megabytes per second.
Well, you think about how our culture and what we do has changed. You think back to when you had that dial-up connection, you were just surfing web pages, maybe occasionally downloading something small, and then you get to the point where maybe social networking came in, MySpace, Facebook, and now maybe you're uploading some pictures or uploading a song to MySpace or something. Now you need a little more data. Okay, well, that's not too bad. You got DSL starting out. And you keep looking at how we're progressing, and depending upon your age range, you've got groups of people that instead of watching a traditional TV station are streaming everything they watch. Now you need internet for that, or they're streaming all the music they're listening to instead of listening to traditional radio.
Okay.
And I think if you look way into the future, maybe 10, 20 years out, my personal view of the future is a day is going to come where the traditional TV stations go off the air as we know it. The traditional radio stations aren't going to come on AM or FM anymore. They're going to go off the air as we know it. Not that the station itself will go away, but a day will come where instead of turning your TV to Channel 5 and watching Channel 5 out of Green Bay, you're just going to stream their news from their website or their app or whatever it is in the future. It's all going to come over your data. I think a day will come way in the future where instead of having an FM radio in your car, it's just an internet tuner, and you tune in Waupaca radio stream or WDUX's stream on there, and it mimics the area you're in. So instead of things coming that way, it's all. I think more and more stuff's going to come on data, and we're going to consume it differently, and it can be more efficient too.
Okay, so if we have, and I could talk for an hour about the pros and cons of society speeding up, but if we have a highway, you can only make a highway just so big. I mean, I think China's got a 45-lane highway, I think, something like that. But it was all over Facebook. But
There it is.
but you can still only make a highway so big. So how can they continue to make, Cliff, internet faster and faster and faster if everything has to be on the same highway?
Well, you'd have to make the frequency higher. So let me explain. Light, for instance. When we mentioned light before, like through fiber optics, that's not nearly as far as it can go. Like right now, there was a fellow who did a presentation at a TED Talk where he had a light, and it was blinking really fast, but imperceptible to our eyes. And he had a computer that was receiving that, and he was streaming a video through the lights. And that's where things are headed. There is so much bandwidth in just visible light. It's mind-boggling. So that's why, in other words, all this stuff, all the cars and everything, they're going to be going faster. They're going to go way, way, way faster. And that's all we need.
They're going to drive on top of each other. We're going to have 2-3 lanes of traffic on top of each other.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to do that. You're going to. We are
flying cars.
Yeah.
There is one that was just tested in California. They're testing automated, computer-run semi-trucks in Europe, where the guys sit in a recliner right behind the steering wheel and nap while the thing goes down the road.
That sounds safe.
It's wild.
Yeah.
They're actually.
It probably is, actually.
It wouldn't have been as fun driving truck if I couldn't steer the steering wheel, but that's a whole
Yeah.
different story. So I'm assuming that if you're talking, when we talk about fiber optics, is that when we're talking about it going through light instead of through the air?
Well, fiber is basically a glass cable that the
Yeah.
data can move at the speed of light through that.
It conducts the light. But there is a way to do it through light, like visible light through the air as well.
Okay.
But that's not here yet.
So are they making the highways bigger, or are they making?
I think the way to say them is they're making more efficient use of the highways.
Because with an autopilot car, you literally could drive down the road at 100 miles an hour with that much room between vehicles and never get into an accident.
That's a pretty good analogy.
So that's kind of the way that
You're taking the wireless that there is now and you're finding ways to take that same space, or you creatively use a new space And how can we make how can we take this space and make it more efficient so more data can pass
Yeah.
through there quicker?
And that's a really good example too, because of self-driving cars. I saw examples of that where if you had a whole row of them, you know, right now, like when you start going after everybody's stopped, it's usually one right in front goes, then the next one goes. If they're all self-driving, they all move at exactly the same pace, and it's so much more efficient that way.
It is.
You know, so just more
And
efficient use
safer.
of what you already
Sure.
have. It's that combined with also these new technologies.
My personal guess is the wireless is a mix, or the future is a mix of fiber and wireless. You're not going to get fiber everywhere because of the cost, but I think a day will come in urban areas where maybe the coax cable and the telephone lines eventually get phased out and they run that fiber because it makes sense because of the dense population. But rural areas, I can't for sure predict the future, but my guess is they're not going to run fiber up and down every street in the United States.
Well, I mean, it even, to me, and explain to me why I'm wrong or why I'm right, but it makes no sense to me if I can send data wirelessly. So if I can do everything I want to do without any wires, then why on earth would I spend $50,000 a mile to tear up sidewalks and lay fiber?
That's a great question.
You've got limitations to wireless, at least in the present form.
Yeah, in the present form. In the future, though, you're right. There's a thing called a rectenna, and it's a rectified antenna. This is neat. Follow me through this. So anybody who's had a key fob, you go around and you wave your key fob in front of a lock or whatever, it unlocks. Inside of that thing, there is what's called an RFID tag, radio frequency ID.
Yep.
It's taking radio from that little black box next to the door, and there's an antenna in there. It's absorbing it. Now on that antenna, there's a diode, and it basically prevents electricity from going in both directions. It creates a current inside of it out of the air, and it transmits something back. A rectified antenna is what that is. It's essentially, the RFID tag has a rectified antenna in it. Now, it is possible to create an optical rectenna. It's been proven in labs. This is futuristic stuff, but it is possible. So in other words, someday, you'll be able to have devices that are just powered by the very light that's hitting them. So if you have, let's say, what we were talking about before, with fiber optics and the use of light and things like that, that means you can have a device that not only is powered by the light that's hitting it, so there's no cables, no batteries, well, you probably still have batteries, but you don't need to plug it in anywhere. It's also transmitting across that too. I mean, do you see the power in that? How convenient that would be?
That's next generation
Yes.
solar power,
Yeah.
which can heat my home, and it can turn on outdoor lights.
Amazing stuff.
Right?
Yeah,
So,
that's coming down
I
the
mean,
road.
that's what you're,
Let's take a look kind of what's going on now or shortly in the future. And you're talking years out, and
Yeah.
it'll happen at some point. It's just how quick does that technology develop, and is it perfected, and is it actually implemented out there? And, this could be 10, 20 years maybe.
It's going to be a while.
So a couple things.
exponentialism,
Yeah.
not going to be very long at all.
So we talked
Yeah,
about
we'll see.
satellite internet before. There are companies out there talking about doing low orbit satellites that are close to Earth. Now you're not sending your data as far. That's one thing that's coming. How quick does it get implemented? Is it actually successful when it's implemented?
Yeah. I think Amazon was talking about that. Elon Musk, I think, said something about that.
So that's one thing that's promising for the future. Another thing, when you think about fixed wireless, Waupaca Online, other services like that out there that establish points of presence, access points in areas that you put the antenna in your house and point on there. I think you can elaborate on there. There are future technologies within that existing wireless spectrum that are a lot more efficient, that can get around, that can get you more speed, or maybe get around obstructions that are in the way.
Yeah, so there's, like the stuff I was talking about before, that's definitely going to be a thing. It's just a ways out. Something that's a little bit more immediate is what they call OFDM, and it's an acronym, stands for Orthogonal Frequency Division Multiplexing. That's actually used right now. Totally, just follow me through this, it'll be fine. So, but now coming up next, they have a new standard, 802.11ax, and that has what's called OFDM-A. And that's the same thing, orthogonal frequency division, multiple access. And this is significant because it divides all the channels into what are called RUs. Those are like a resource unit, you could think of them as. And it's kind of like dividing it by time. So let's say I want to transmit something and you want to transmit something, but I've been told by the device I'm trying to communicate with that I can only say something every other second starting with the first, and you can say something every other second starting with the second. And so we never interrupt each other. You see what's happening there?
Yep.
It's a fancy acronym, but I'm trying to break it down. That's essentially what it's saying. Just let's take turns and whatever. So that's something that we're going to be implementing in the very near future. That's something that's actually rolling right now. The Wi-Fi Alliance is talking about that as we speak, and I think there's new devices coming out later this year.
And let's talk about the other big one right now, 5G. So everyone hears 5G. Where's that being rolled out right now? Large cities, Chicago, the New Yorks. They're not in Waupaca. I don't even think they're touching Milwaukee yet. I might be wrong on that, but so the cell companies that are slowly starting to implement 5G, where are they doing it? Where the population is, where they're going to make the most profit.
Where the money's at.
Sure.
And I think, and this is just my personal prediction, there's a lot of issues with 5G. I've read different articles or a lot of scuttlebutt about pros and cons with it. And I think by the time they're even close to getting to somewhere like Waupaca or rural America, I think that technology is going to be different than what they're trying to implement right now. Just because technology changes and gets better.
It's going to be a while, and before they even get out here, and it's going to be changed by the time it arrives. But the stuff that I was describing, that's something that you're going to see with, let's say, Waupaca Online, and it will result in even more speed, we'll be able to support more people on these POPs that I was talking about before. So these are real tangible improvements that we'll be seeing in the foreseeable future. So, yeah, it's definitely on the up and up.
So to sum it up, I think, right now, I think in general with the internet right now, we're kind of in this phase where maybe the future technology to make wireless really work well, really give people the expectation they want from it, it's not quite there yet. It works okay, but it's got its limitations. And then you've got the existing telephone infrastructure, the copper lines that some of the phone companies are pushing to try to get to the point where it's considered a non-essential service so they can kind of ditch them and not worry about it anymore because it's expensive to maintain. So we're kind of in this place right now. People want this really fast internet. Technology's not quite there to do it, and it's not cost effective to do it the ways that are working well today. And Cliff, I know, has done a lot of research what's coming out there. And it might be 5 years. 10 years, and all of a sudden this wireless technology is going to get so good that it's able to deliver the speeds people expect and want to do the communications they need. So we've got to get through this valley before it gets better.
Well, and it has always been like that. I grew up with party phone line. Do you know what a party line is?
I do not.
You're really young.
A party line is where an entire neighborhood shares the same phone number. So when you pick up the phone in your house, you can hear your neighbors chatting because they're on the same phone line, and then you just hang up. And if it's really important, then you interrupt them and say, "Can I use the phone?"
That sounds awful.
And the boys would climb the telephone wires with tin cans and listen to everybody's conversations on the telephone pole.
That sounds fun.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was incredible compared to the phones of 50 years prior to that. So people laugh because that's what I had when I was a kid, but my parents didn't have phones in their house when they were a kid. So if we look at how the phone has grown as far as what is now available, then
We're going to see the same thing with internet.
except we're
History
going to see
repeats
it a
itself.
whole lot faster because it's exponential. So everything is in halftime. So what it took to do 5 years ago is now taking 2.5, will take 1.25 years here.
So I'd like to, from my perspective, tie back what we've been talking about, maybe kind of close up with what's going on in Waupaca County. So
Yes.
we've talked about a lot of stuff, the future, the past. So let's get outside of our cities and villages that have okay internet or good internet. What's going on in the rural areas that aren't populated?
Well,
So
yeah,
one
what do
thing
they have
going on
today?
Let's talk. So aside from the DSL, if you're in an area where you can't get good DSL, satellite, cellular, considering you can get a good signal, and with the limitations on those. But one thing I'll talk about, and I wish I knew where they're getting the money from, because we talked about how expensive it is. Amherst Telephone Company's been running a lot of fiber within their telephone coverage area up and down rural roads. So there are a lot of areas, kind of Farmington up toward Amherst that way, where you can get fiber internet at home in a rural area, which is pretty neat.
Is that part of this Wisconsin? Because the state of Wisconsin
I'm not
is
sure,
pushing.
since I don't work for them or I'm not privy to any of their details, I don't know if they have a grant or funding or what they're doing, but they've been very aggressive with that, and I think that's really neat to see. But that's only one small corner of Waupaca County. Then you've got a lot of the other traditional telephone providers that are kind of sitting and not doing much. Or again, we're not privy to what their business plans are. I don't know if CenturyLink's got something up their sleeve tomorrow, but from where I sit and what I see and what I know, I don't see the CenturyLinks and Frontiers of the world in rural Waupaca County jumping out tomorrow and doing this awesome upgrade.
Yeah.
So then the other thing going on in Waupaca County, Waupaca Online, there's a couple other providers, Star and Granite Wireless, that have some coverage in the county doing the fixed wireless thing. So when you're working with wireless, you don't have to run the cable, so you're not looking at that $20,000 to $60,000 per mile. You're putting up some wireless communication at one location and shooting it to another to make your connection, to get data from where it starts to where you're going. And then you've got that house sitting out there that has an antenna pointing at that tower. And the nice thing about that is it's more managed than I'm trying to think of a way to explain this well. So you think about all those cell phones, they're not fixed in one location. You're moving point to point with your cell phone. So you might not always be on the same tower. There might be a lot of people on this tower, not a lot on this one. And it varies. With a fixed wireless internet, you're fixed in one location. That antenna's on your house pointed there. You're not moving that around.
Right.
And now the company managing that service can manage how many people are connected to that antenna. Okay, we've got too many, let's put up another antenna.
Yep.
They can manage that. I won't say all, but a lot of fixed wireless providers are small little companies. They're not corporations. They're more, I almost want to say grassroots a little bit. It's just a little company. We know there's a need for internet. We can do this inexpensive. We can put something together okay.
Well, it's very Waupaca Online,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. And with that, they can manage the speed that's going out there. I don't think a lot of them have data limits. You can use all the data you want up to the space you have on your highway. So if you've got a 10 megabit per second connection, you can use up to that 10 meg, that they're not going to cut you off after a certain period of time, because it's all known what's going on. It's all managed. Unlike a cell phone tower, if you've got a ton of people there sharing it, they're going to slow down the people that have used their fair share for the month.
Because they only have so much to go around, so they have to budget it somehow, and they do that by punishing you for using your connection the way you'd expect that you'd be able to. So that's one thing we're able to do that I don't really see anybody else doing in any equivalence.
So I know Waupaca Online's got the State Public Service Commission broadband grant, and Waupaca Online's working on an expansion project in portions of Waupaca County with fixed wireless. I don't like on technicality. Cellular operates in a place on the spectrum that can get through obstructions and trees better. Fixed wireless operates higher up, and it can't get through trees. It can't get through hills. So it works well. It excels in areas that are flat and aren't buried in a forest, but doesn't work well in those other areas. So it's not a solution for everything. But as that wireless technology that Clifford was talking about gets even better, that might combat some of those issues. And as that technology gets better, then those wireless services can get to more areas and can become faster. So to sum it up, you've got fiber. Amherst is being very aggressive with that. I could see a day where a company, this might be 10 years out, but I could see a day where it ends up being fiber in the city of Waupaca. I think that's a long way from happening, but as that cable infrastructure ages, what's the next step in those densely populated areas? And then you get the more rural areas, it's going to be more and more of the wireless, I think, is the long-term solution out there. And eventually it gets better and more reliable, that they're able to push faster speeds.
And that's the whole purpose of technology. Make it better, make it more reliable. With internet, let's make it faster, with all of those kinds of services.
But we can't watch TV, we can't do homework, we can't have a home business or work from home if this technology doesn't continue to improve and get out there.
And that is hindering. It is those of us who live in the country because that is the lifestyle we love, that is a huge hindrance.
It's a trade-off, and it
It
shouldn't
is.
have to be.
No, it shouldn't. Yeah.
You're right. So, thanks for joining us today. We talked about internet everything. I think my head hurts. But I learned a lot. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. Cliff Rutke was
a
here
pleasure.
with all of his intel. Should we call it intel? Rainbows.
Yeah, rainbows of knowledge. Yeah. Sure. Thanks.
And Josh Werner, it's always a pleasure to have you on. We will do some of this again because I know that Waupaca County, I know that you with Waupaca Online are very concerned about being able to provide as much of Waupaca County area internet as you can. And I know that you're growing in that, and I know that this broadband grant helped. So we'll stay in touch and see where that's going and see if we're into the new wavelengths next year. It's not wireless. We'll be doing everything Dr. Spock style through the brain.
I don't think that'll happen in my lifetime.
Yeah, me neither.
I have quit thinking anything couldn't is what I've done. Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Happening in Waupaca. I'm Joni, and we'll see you next time.